Cool. Well, what I'll do then is I'll just do our introduction and then we'll get going. So my name's Jay Nordler, and with me I also have Steve Milledge, who's the CEO, founder and spiritual leader of Payara. He's going to be giving up a roadmap overview for the next sort of 3 months, and also a little bit of a retrospective on last year as well, and what can be expected in the upcoming releases, with a little bit of information on Payara Cloud and news on the sort of latest OpenJDK release and long-term support. So if we're all ready to get started, take it away, Steve.
Thanks, Jaden. Hi, as Jaden said, I'm Steve Milledge. I've just discovered I'm spiritual leader of Payara, which was a new title. I'm also going to destroy Jaden's summary of my presentation because it's...
Oh, what? Has it changed?
Because I'm really looking at 2021. I thought at the beginning of the year, I will do a more longer view of our roadmap than the traditional 3-month roadmap. So
Fantastic.
I'll go into the agenda. So sorry about that, Jaden.
No, that's great.
New year, new life. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to recap a little bit about Payara platform and how I see it and the team see it as moving forward as we go into the new era with Jakarta EE and into 2021. And as part of that, I will also sort of give you a breakdown of the road to Payara 6. And then I'll be going into a little bit about Payara Cloud, but that fits into the more general picture of how we see the Payara platform evolving and what will happen as we move to sort of Payara 6 version, because obviously we're on Payara 5 at the moment. Payara 6 will be a sort of major second version for us. Our first release of Payara was version 4 because it was given the name to match up with the Glassfish release that we forked the software from. But Payara 6 won't be based on Glassfish 6. It'll be based off our own code bases. So, and then I've got some time if there's any desire for anyone to raise questions or have a discussion. So I should be talking probably around 30 minutes. Okay, so let's dive straight in. One of the things I wanted to discuss, and everybody probably here knows, is really the benefits of Jakarta EE model. And what do I mean by that? So the Payara platform is a Jakarta EE compatible platform. And Jakarta EE came from Java EE, and Java EE has had a very specific model of developing applications. And that model has been, attacked and criticized and by competitors for many years, but we actually want to go back into this model and describe it and understand why it's there and why it's a benefit for Jakarta EE and Java EE developers and perhaps other developers in the future. So Jakarta EE really splits away your application from the runtime. So the picture here, I've got your application as a jigsaw piece. And the runtime, which is the Payara platform, is the white piece. And then we've got some standard APIs, which are Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. And then all that runs on what we're calling compute infrastructure. So bare metal, Kubernetes, Docker, whatever. And what Java EE did from the very early days, it was it split packaging and deployment of your application quite explicitly from your runtime, where your runtime is a Payara server. So what that means practically for you is that you build a WAR file or an EA file or a jar or a RAR or whatever, one of the other sort of 3-letter archive acronyms that you can build in Java EE, Jakarta EE. And that allows you to spend your time actually concentrating on building your application and just packaging it. And what the Payara platform does, it's essentially is a managed runtime. And our job is to manage many of the other aspects of running your application that you don't really need to concern yourself with too much. So one of them, and these are what the cogs are that we have under here to represent. So what Payara Server or Payara Micro or Payara Cloud will do for you is we manage sort of security we manage connectors into security. So we manage talking to LDAP servers. We would manage talking to databases for, we manage a lot of that on the security side, and also, making authorization checks or authentication checks. And you just do that as an application, you do that declaratively. Similarly, the server manages workload through threads and thread pooling and how to do async, and a lot of those things are also managed by the runtime. We obviously manage logging and log setup. We can manage messaging. We handle database connectivity with connection pooling to make sure that only a certain number of connections are used, and then we can gather metrics and insight into how your application is running. And then also, we obviously handle all the network protocols, so HTTP handling, WebSockets, SOAP, or any of the other myriad of protocols, including right back down to CORBA, that the application server does for you. And this is sort of how Java-EE was set up from the beginning. And as we were starting to look forward, we realized that this is actually a really good model. And there's been a lot of trend to make jar not war, or to build and package your runtime yourself and assemble it yourself, just to make sure, just so that you can have full control. But the actual Jakarta model itself has many benefits. And first one is actually that tight separation allows us to take your application and abstract it away from your compute infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then all you really need to worry about is using the APIs, which are standards-based, Jakarta-EE and MicroProfile. So as we started developing our 2021 roadmap, so 3-4 months ago, we thought about also, where is Payara positioned, say, relative to other frameworks, application servers, and things. So one of the key things for us is that what we want to be, and we want to be first for Jakarta-EE developers. So if you're a Jakarta-EE developer, we want to be your first choice. And I'll talk about how we think we are going to approach that in 2021. The second bit is that we are committed to Jakarta-EE. And what that means is that we are fully committed into the Jakarta-EE working group. And as we'll see, there's things that need to happen in Jakarta-EE to make life better for developers and for running modern applications. And that now we're at the beginning of 2021, we are at the point where Jakarta-EE 9 has been released, the namespace change has been done, the processes are in place, that now we need to, as I mentioned later, we need to move forward. And then we are a Jakarta-EE product, and we're committed to drive that forward. So that's a lot of our, a lot of our focus in 2021 will be on that. So what we want you to do, and this is what we've been coming to a conclusion, is if we take that Java-EE Jakarta-EE deployment model, what we want you to do as developers is, what we are here to enable is for you to build applications and not spend time building infrastructure. Whereas, the Payara team, our job is to use and allow you to work in all the infrastructure that's come along in the past few years. Most, when we looked back, most of the innovation probably for cloud and things has actually occurred in infrastructures rather than, say, APIs and things like that. Java-EE Jakarta doesn't need to fundamentally change to with lots and lots of new APIs to work in cloud. It works anyway. But what does need to change is we need to ensure that things like Payara work on new infrastructure. So just to illustrate that, we have, this is, as a developer, if you wanted to take your WAR file and get this working on Kubernetes, what do you have to do? So you have to take your WAR file, you have to take your favorite Jakarta-EE server or runtime, and hopefully that's Payara. And then you need to sort of write yourself a Docker file. You need to then generate a container image that would include, the Jakarta-EE server and the WAR file. And again, when doing that, there are some advantages to the Java-EE deployment model, in that you can build a container image that just contains your server in one layer and your WAR file in another layer. And I know Adam Bean talks a lot about thin WARs for this reason, that the WAR file changes rapidly, whereas your layer below the server will change not so rapidly. And again, there's an advantage to the Java model over, say, packaging everything in one big jar. But once you have that Docker file and a container image, now you have a Docker image, you can run that container on different types of infrastructure. However, if you then want to take that into Kubernetes, so maybe Kubernetes is your compute infrastructure. The way we see Kubernetes is it is an application server, but for Docker images, container images. And therefore, what you will need to do to get that working is you need to create a YAML file to create your pod definitions, you need to sort it out with secrets, and then you need to install it onto an infrastructure that you may need to create, which would be Kubernetes on top of virtual machines or physical machines. And then you need to configure an API gateway. So a lot of the actual effort involved is building infrastructure rather than actually building business code. And so when we took a look at that, I mean, what we really want to do is, from the Payara side, is we want to enable you to just build your applications. And the first time you do this, it's interesting. It's a learning experience. You could even say it's cool and shiny, but the second time, third time you do it, then it is not so interesting. So our goal is really to make sure that we can try and abstract a lot of this stuff away. So this is our sort of vision of where the Payara platform's going in the long term, or hopefully in most of 2021. Is what we want to do is, let's say, allow you to build your applications and then allow us to manage a lot of the infrastructure. So what we're seeing, this is our view, is that you should be able to take your WAR file that may contain microservices, or it could be even a monolith, or a micro monolith, or whatever the new term is, and actually not care where you deploy it. You should be able to take that application, deploy it onto IoT and edge platforms, and Payara Micro will be targeting more and more into sort of the edge and containers itself. So that would be within the container and would be a single instance. And so therefore Payara Micro, we're making smaller, faster, to fit into these environments. And then we're looking at Payara Server. So Payara Server will be targeted and worked on to scale across the mid-range, really. So we're looking at from bare containers right through to sort of Kubernetes and sit well on the Kubernetes infrastructure. And from your perspective as a developer, you shouldn't really care what infrastructure this is going to sit on. And we should be enabling you to take your application and run on any of these infrastructure. And then right up to Payara Cloud, which we see as our product that will sit on large scale, hyperscale cloud environments or hybrid cloud environments. And Payara Cloud initially will be deployed as a sort of PaaS solution initially, but ultimately we'll be looking to make that a user installable product so that it can sit on top of whatever cloud you want, and you can manage it in your own cloud environment in your own data centers. And I'll come on to what Payara Cloud is in a minute. So our view is really to try and double down on the application server concept, allow you to build Jakarta compatible deployments, and then allow us to manage all the innovation that's happened in infrastructure over the past few years. Right through both on the small side with the Raspberry Pis and edge computing platforms, right through to the hyperscale cloud. So how are we going to do this? So we thought, we'd be going through this, and the 6 key pillars that we need to make sure that Payara is the best. The first is standards. We are committed to standards. If you're a Jakarta Java developer, you obviously care about standards. That's why you're still here. And so first thing is Payara platform needs to track the standards, and the 2 standards we're mainly tracking are Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. The second is, as I've discussed, we need to be compute infrastructure agnostic. We shouldn't care, or Payara should work well running on cloud, Kubernetes, VMs, containers, and bare metal and small platforms. So we need to build that compute infrastructure agnosticism into the platform. And from your perspective, you should be able to take your application and know it'll work. The third thing is, what is the advantage of having a managed runtime? Managed runtimes, are all over the place. So, your Java is a managed runtime, Kubernetes is a managed runtime for containers, and obviously Payara Platform is a managed runtime for your Java and Jakarta applications. And what we can do to provide a lot of value as the managed runtime is we want to be able to give you deep diagnostics. We want, as we are running your application, we should know, and we do know internally, everything that's going on within your application, and therefore we need to surface that information and visualize it so that you can use it as a developer to find out how everything's connected and how that's going to work. And if there's any problems, alert you to them. The fourth pillar is developer experience. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but at this point, but one of the key things is, we're going to we've built out our IDE plugins. They're going to be kept up to speed, up to date with all the latest releases. There's people dedicated now just purely onto developer experience in IDE plugins. And that includes Arquillion and Maven and the general tooling and CI tooling as well. So we'll be having more focus on building out that, and we're always up for guidance on what's a priority. The fifth is ecosystem. So there's a whole load of stuff out there in the world that you'll need to talk to from your Jakarta applications, and we need to enable that. So we need to enable that through plugins for security, to talk to different security providers like OAuth, or it could be that we need to talk to different APM platforms like Datadog, or we need to talk to messaging platforms like Kafka. So, that all that infrastructure that we need to bring to you as developers so that you can use it simply within Jakarta applications. And the final one is stability, and I've used that in a big term that includes both quality of the platform, how we migrate and move from different versions, and general performance, and so that you are running on a platform that is managing your application in real world. So these are the areas that we're going to focus on, and the presentation touches on them, but we're not going to go through each one in turn. So that's the sort of vision of how we see Payara in the next couple of years. So I was going to talk about how we go through to the Payara 6 release. So if we look at our core timeline, this is obviously subject to change because a lot of this is also outside of our control. This is the core timeline of, say, external events that are occurring in that we need to manage on your behalf, really, and bring to you as Jakarta developers. So these are based mainly around when standards are going to drop. So MicroProfile 4, we should have support for MicroProfile 4, which is just out after Christmas, and that will be available February 2021 in our next release. Throughout 2021, we'll be doing standard monthly or roughly monthly releases of community and enterprise. And community will tend to take these things on as fast as possible, and enterprise will get them when we're happy that they are, that they are stable and working well. We are looking to make a Jakarta 9 compatible implementations as just after MicroProfile 4, sometime in that first few months. MicroProfile 4.1 will come out in the middle of the year, and we will aim to support that within 1 or 2 releases. Then another big thing that happens this year in 2021 is JDK 17 should drop sometime in September as the next latest LTS. And our plan is to support that LTS within a couple of releases of that coming out. So you should be able to use the latest Java 17, very close to the release date of Java 17. We'll obviously wait till after the release, and then we'll do a community release a couple of releases later. And then as we move into the end of the year, MicroProfile 5 will come out. It could be in front of December 21, it could be after, and that major release we will support again very quickly after that comes out. We're members of that working group. And then the plan is that we will drop Payara 6 probably in Q1 2022, but this will be aligned with the Jakarta EE 10 release date, and that has not been set, but I imagine it's going to be sometime in the first half of 2022, or maybe even creep into 2021. But we're going to align the Payara 6 release with Jakarta EE 10 release. So the reason why we're doing that is currently we do support some Jakarta E9 in Payara 5, and that's in tech preview now in the community. And the way we do that is you take a Jakarta E9 application, if you deploy it to Payara, it basically detects the Jakarta namespace and it transforms that your application back into a Jakarta EE8 application. And using this technique, we plan to get Jakarta E9 compatibility. And there'll be work we need to do within the internals of Payara to do that. At the moment, we can support many applications, but not everything in the Jakarta namespace. That will flip around when we do 6. Got Payara X still on there, but it's 6 now. What we're going to do then is Payara 6 will be fully compiled against Java 11, or even maybe in the latest LTS version. At the minute, Payara 5 compiles against Java 8, so you can run it on Java 8, but it does also run on Java 11. But in 6, we will move the whole compilation up to the latest Java release. And then when you take, so this will also be completely in the new Jakarta namespace. So everything within Payara 6 will be in the Jakarta namespace. And what we'll do is we'll support older applications through the transformation process that we did before in 5. So what we'll do is we'll detect the JavaX namespace in your application, and we will transform that with full backwards compatibility up to the Jakarta namespace. So you'll be able to run both new applications natively on Payara 6 in the Jakarta namespace, and old applications in JavaX will work through a transformation layer. And that happens at deployment. So it shouldn't affect the application at runtime, but at deployment, the namespace is a switch through some bytecode fiddling, basically. And that release will be aligned with Jakarta E10, and we think that'll be 2022, beginning of 2022. So a lot of our focus in 2021 will be actually driving innovation in Jakarta EE. As I said, a lot of the Jakarta E9 is out. There's going to be a 9.1, but that's just a point release that will allow you to run the TCKs on version 11 of Java. But 10 is where now the specs are open to change and open for modification. And I won't go into all what we're planning in there or any of our ideas, but what we want to do is see community to start driving Jakarta E back forward with new APIs or new changes to APIs, better consistency, more, better integration with the CDI. So a little brief word on enterprise and community, mainly because, so the way we, just to reiterate, community is released monthly, and a lot of these changes will come into community first. And community is likely to more evolve towards Payara 6, and it'd be a big bang, except for when it, the namespace switches and the Java version switches. That will be a big bang, but the rest of it will come in slowly. Enterprise will track it when it's stable, and basically will come in through it a bit slower. Also, the community development team are really focused on, on how, this is how we see things. This is not a product names. This is how we see it internally. The community team are very focused on the Payara core. The core is basically, you could think of it as what's in Payara Micro, but with full platform support for all the APIs. So core for us is like the single JVM. It's the all the APIs, all the stuff I mentioned in the Payara runtime, and then the full platform development includes lots of other things around the edge. So which operating systems we support, what databases do we certify, connectors to security things, the plugins, automation, all those sort of things are all in what we call the platform development team, because they're building more than just the single core JVM runtime. So basically, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through some of the things that we're going to change, and the core. I'm going to go through the core first, and then go through the platform. So these are the key changes that we're hoping to get in before we hit Payara 6. So I won't say into 2021, but these are things that will happen in community before the 6th release. And I'm going to pick out some of them, but here, first thing is CDI implementation. I'll talk about that. We also want to create a new servlet implementation, or maybe we'll embed something else. Currently in Payara, we have a fork of Tomcat, which is very stripped down. That takes quite a bit of maintenance. So we're looking to create a new servlet implementation, which is fully compatible. We're going to do a lot more work on integrated tracing and monitoring. We do have a lot of integrated tracing and monitoring, but we're going to build it more and more into the depths of the runtime, so that we can give information to you as developers. There's a whole lot of work on logging that's going to get done, and then we are looking at creating a completely new EJB timer subsystem. We recognize EJB timers are a bit of a pain in Payara, and this area needs a whole new overhaul, probably with changes that will happen in 11 as well. And then another area we're looking at is gRPC-based remoting. So, and I've got a quick slide on that. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at a CDI implementation, and there's a couple of reasons why. First is we already have a dependency injection framework. Currently, Payara ships with Weld, which is JBoss Weld. That provides a full CDI implementation, but Payara itself is built on a dependency injection framework called HK2, which stands for 100 kilobyte kernel or 200 kilobyte kernel. There's also activity in Jakarta at the minute around a CDI Lite or Core or whatever they decide to call it, which will be AOT focused, ahead of time compilation focused, so that it can support as a baseline for Jakarta and MicroProfile. And we basically want to build that, our implementation of that, on top of our HK2 implementation. So if we do that, then that would allow us to then build a full CDI implementation. And that will allow us to have one implementation within Payara for DI, and I think that will make Payara faster and smaller. And possibly we may be able to do some AOT type implementation work. So if you look at better tracing and monitoring, as I said, we are managed runtime. So what we want to do is make sure that we can tell you what's going on. We already have request tracing. We already have health checks and notifiers. So it's really just having a revamp of that to make sure we can get as much information out of your application as possible, so that we can tell you, if need be, what's going on, if there's a problem. So for example, a request comes in, we want to be able to track all the HTTP details and put it on a trace. We want to time method calls. We want to time external calls. We want to check your SQL queries. And like I say, a lot of this can be done, but what we need to do is put in a lot of plugins, and you'll have seen work in community to strip out some of the notifier APIs and things like that. And these are the bits that then take that information and send it to other tools. So for example, tracer plugins would go into Jaeger or Zipkin, or APM tools like Datadog. Notifiers, we could tend to log messages or SNMP traps or whatever, and be able for you to be able to plug your own in. We have a tool called Insight in Enterprise. It's an open source project, so there is a different GitHub repo for it, and that's our way of allowing you to visualize this stuff without you having to set up, Prometheus or something else. And then we also want to integrate with Flight Recorder. So Flight Recorder shipped in 11. It is backported on Zulu to 8 in the JVM, but we don't directly go into it because it's not available on all JVMs. So that's coming. We'll be doing a lot of work on Payara Insight. It is a pretty good tool at the moment anyway, but it sits on top of the instrumentation that's in the core. and so we'll be working a lot, creating a lot more instrumentation. So gRPC remoting is something that's been asked quite a bit from some customers to support gRPC, and not just to support gRPC, but for gRPC services to then use all the standard Jakarta EE components once the gRPC call comes in. So the other thing that's happening in Java 11 is that Corba has been dropped out of the JVM. We do still support it on Java 11, but that is the actual fundamental protocol currently in Payara. Is actual for remote service calls or remote EJB calls is actually Corba and IAOP. So we'll be looking at creating a gRPC implementation that will allow you to call remote EJBs, and it will also allow you to create gRPC services which are effectively become like a remote EJB, and will allow you to then use injection, have transaction demarcation, and all the other things that you would normally get from the runtime. So that should be coming in 2021. And then we look at what we're going to do to the actual more wider scale outside of the single JVM. And there's only one of these that I'm going to talk about, but the first one's the one I'm going to talk about, so I'll skip that. We're obviously looking at how you install Payara on Kubernetes. And we'll be bringing out a Kubernetes operator. We've also done a lot of Kubernetes work. Payara works well in Kubernetes at the minute. It just takes a bit of work to set up and some blogs to read and things, but that all works. But we'll be creating Kubernetes specific tooling around that. And then we've also started creating migration tooling and upgrade tooling. So migration tooling is migration from, say, JBoss to Payara, and upgrade tooling is from different versions, upgrading from one version of Payara to another. So if we go into that auto scaling, so this is just a view of something that we're building on the Payara server side. If we remember that sort of continuum of infrastructure that we want to sit on, server sits in the middle, whereas cloud is going to sit on top of Kubernetes and basically creates a Kubernetes native application server, if you like. Cloud server has to sit and span many different things. So what we're going to do is create the concept to be renamed called for now auto scaling. So what this will do, so currently we have deployment groups, and within deployment groups you have Payara instances, and Payara instances can currently live on a node, which is an SSH into a server, or it can live on a Docker container. What we need to do is take those ideas and you can always add another layer of abstraction. So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to introduce something called a compute provider, and that basically will take on what a node does, but be more general. So basically what the DAS can do, it can use a compute API to ask for more compute resource, and that in a Kubernetes case would be to spin up more pods. In a virtualization case, say VMware, maybe to spin up some more VMs. For bare metal, it'll just be to spin up some more JVMs on the same physical hardware. And through a cloud API, it could use elastic scaling APIs or something like that. So basically, so from the DAS, you'll be able to take a deployment group and say, give me 6 nodes of this, or something like that. That's the first bit. And those nodes, I say, could be any one of those different types of compute. The second thing is then to add, obviously we have metrics, and we're building more metrics. And then the second bit to add on top of those metrics is obviously scale rules. So the DAS can look at metrics from the instances, say number of web sessions or HTTP requests per second. And then actually you'd be able to write rules so that if it exceeds thresholds, then you could auto scale out the number of compute. So the number of instances basically by using the compute API, and Payara could do that. So the admin server could do that for you. So the concept is that you'd add, say rules. When those rules are exceeded or met, then the DAS can auto scale up or auto scale down instances for you. The flip side of that is then we also need an ingress API. We need to talk to the thing that is routing traffic to your instances to tell it that there are more. So we'll also be bringing an ingress API, and that will allow us to plug into either Kubernetes ingress or Nginx or other like API gateways or whatever it is in the cloud that we need to talk to tell it that there's more instances. And so they were building, this is one of the major things that we'll be building out within 2021. So this would allow you to basically sit Payara server, that is, with a domain model and sit it across different compute infrastructure. Then you could ask the question, why bother doing that? Because Kubernetes does it, but the point is you then have to learn Kubernetes and you need to do all that Kubernetes stuff. And then if it was on VMware, then you need to do that instead, or if it was on GCP, Google Cloud Platform, you would need to do that, learn that. So we think we can do that for you. And so you just take your application and you put it in deployment group and you say scale this. So that's one of the big ideas that we've got coming to 2021. So briefly on Payara Cloud. So the whole concept of Payara Cloud really is to take your application, as I said before, as a unit that you build applications, not the infrastructure, and then you can deploy it onto a cloud platform. So on that continuum picture I showed, Payara Cloud is on the right-hand side, running on Hyperscale Cloud and Kubernetes. So basically this is an application server built, a Jakarta EE application server built from the ground up, using the core Payara runtime, like I mentioned, and that then sits on top of Kubernetes and does all the Kubernetes control for you. So all you do is take your application, hit deploy, and it'll run on a cloud platform like Azure. So for example, what it does, like on the picture before, is it does all the Docker container, pod, YAML, secrets. You can use microprofile config API to pull in secrets. It reconfigures API gateways. It deploys your application as a service into Kubernetes, and it can do scale rules on Kubernetes services. So it will sit there and it will do that. So this is sort of the last step really in that continuum. That will be a Kubernetes native Payara platform. The timeline for that is closed beta starting next month. And people are starting to get invites to join the closed beta if they want, and we can still have some slots if people are interested. You can go onto our website for that. Summer 2021, we'll be doing this as an open beta, and then in the autumn, we'll be looking to launch that. In the first instance, as I said, it'll be like a PaaS model because it's just sitting on Azure. But ultimately, it is part of the family, and it will become an installable product. That will sit on top of any Kubernetes cluster in any environment that you want. But the first instance, let's say it'll be like a PaaS for Jakarta EE apps. So just to summarize where we are, basically we want Payara to be first for Jakarta EE developers. If you're a Jakarta EE developer, we want you to come to us first. We don't want you to go to JBoss or someone like that. We are committed to Jakarta EE, and that's both in the working group and right through to the whole development model of Jakarta EE and standards. So as I say, we want to take that development model, that deployment model, and actually build our whole platform around that concept. So that means, we will be able to, you'll be able to spend time more building applications, not spend any time configuring infrastructure. So we base it on these sort of six areas of focus for us that stand up the Payara platform. And ultimately, we want you to be able to take that application that you develop in the Jakarta EE and microprofile APIs and run it on any compute infrastructure, right from edge computing right through to hyperscale cloud. So that's the view that we have for 2021. All I have to do now is get the team to build it. So thank you. Any questions? You there, Jaden?
Yes, yeah. We do have a few questions.
Ooh, questions.
Yeah, the first one we have from Alexander Orlovsky. Does Payara as a company have support or plans for possible migration paths to new Payara server platform from old JBoss, WebLogic, WebSphere, Wildfly, Java E6/7 apps?
That, I'd say, is one of the things I put a bullet point called migration tooling. That is something that we are looking to build out. What we have at the minute is we have professional services. So we have consultants, in other words, consultancy that we can do to analyze applications and help people. And they can also do that through to have an enterprise subscription. They can raise tickets and ask questions around migration. It's not just break fix our enterprise subscription support. So, but we are looking to build tooling that will take applications and run them on newer Payara or move them between applications. One of the beautiful things about Jakarta EE is its backward compatibility. It's also one of the really bad things about Jakarta EE is that many people have got very bad habits. For example, people still are defining data sources in Glassfish resources where you haven't needed to do that since Java EE6. So we want to bring tooling that gives advice. It's probably not going to automatically migrate you everything that you need over to a new application server, but it will provide ideas, areas of concern, and some automation as much as we can.
Okay, then next one from Anonymous. Do we now have the capability to configure periodic snapshots that can be used to restore a Payara instance?
There is a backup and restore. It doesn't do that automatically. You would have to do that manually. But it's an interesting concept, actually, that we did talk about having a job store in the past where you could do these and configure these sort of AES admin commands periodically. So that might be something to resurrect. But yes, you can do backup and restore at the moment. There is an AES admin command for that.
Cool. Oh, that reminds me of that last question for Alexander. We do have a bunch of migration guides on the website for any of those application servers if people want to check those out. I can put that link in the chat. I did send it to Alexander. Joseph Hasenberger asks, will there be differences in available features between community and enterprise release?
So features, the real difference between them from my perspective is the concept. So Payara is still an open source company. Everything that we do is still open source. It's more like if you think of JBoss to Wildfly. So community the main thing about community is to drive innovation. What we want to do is make sure that we can rapidly change community, deliver first on community, and then move enterprise more slowly because we have to support it. In the sense that people are paying for us to support it, and if it breaks, then they get very angry, and that actually leaves quite a difficulty for the development team when they were doing community releases in the past. So we split in really about concept. There will be at times different features between community and enterprise, but the goal isn't to do an open core strategy. So we're not deliberately building out capabilities in enterprise that won't, that aren't in community. Community will probably become more and more packaged to be that core, but that doesn't mean to say that all the bits that I put around the platform aren't in open source, because they will be, whereas enterprise will be more packaged off the shelf. But the idea is not to do an open core strategy, if that's what's behind the question.
Okay, real. Another one from an anonymous person is Payara micro size now trimmed since it's on a virtualized environment?
So we try and make Payara Micro as small as possible. It is trimmed from server, so there's lots of bits. So Payara Micro first is web profile plus. And the plus being it has concurrency and batch APIs, which are useful in a microservices environment. So it is trimmed from compared to server, and it doesn't run on top of OSGI, which server does. But it was already very small. We aim to make it smaller. It can run on, say, Raspberry Pis and things. There's no worries running it in virtualized environments.
Okay. Carlos Goncalves asks, when are we going to be able to develop pure Jakarta EE 9 namespace applications on Payara without the transformer, only on Payara 6 ?
Yes, 6 will be when, so it's two things in there. When you can develop applications, you can do them now, but we do use the transformer at deployment. When Payara is native Jakarta namespace will be Payara 6. So that means the whole of the Payara internal code base will be running on the Jakarta namespace rather than the JAVX namespace. That will be Payara 6, because that's a major breaking change and that will have to be aligned with a 6. And we've done that to align it with Jakarta 10 because at the moment, why go to Jakarta 9 other than to test it out? We couldn't see much of our customer base moving to the new namespace just for the sake of a breaking change. However, 5 will be Jakarta 9 compatible. That is the plan, and so therefore, the fact it's using Transformer will actually be completely transparent. It's just that deployment, it does some stuff to your bytecode, which it already does stuff to your bytecode, to do all the annotation scanning and injection and everything. And it will do it to move it to the new namespace. So it shouldn't have any impact from a performance or anything point of view. Deployment may be a little slower.
Okay. Another one from Alexander. Does Payara Cloud hosted on own server infrastructure, or you use any other cloud provider for hosting? So does it use our own infrastructure, or do we
so when it comes to, so the beta and everything will be running on Microsoft Azure. We will then be running in a PaaS model in the sense that you don't need to install anything. You just deploy a WAR file. Longer term, we'll be looking to make that a enterprise product where you can take it and install it on top of any Kubernetes cluster. We may run out, we'll keep the PaaS product. We imagine that for small microservice deployments and small development shops that don't want to spend time configuring Payara, that'd be a good solution. And we'll probably put it on different clouds. It basically sits on top of Kubernetes at the minute, so it doesn't really care too much that it's on Azure. We could put it on AWS or GCP.
Okay. So thank you guys for waiting. We actually have quite a few questions still. So I will get to them all, I promise. When will we have the ability to upgrade Payara in place as opposed to backup, install new version, and then restore/reconfig?
So there is tooling development at the minute to do this. In place really is, it depends what you mean by in place. If you want it to do it live at runtime without any downtime, we're not doing that yet. There is some migration tooling, upgrade tooling at the moment in enterprise product that basically operates on your domain where it is and downloads the latest version, unzips it and upgrades the domain in place, and you can restore it as well. So that functionality is coming.
Cool.
It's actually in the next release.
Awesome. In future, will there be implementation of some of the functions of a microcontainer like Apache Camel?
That will depend largely on Jakarta and direction of that, really. Apache Camel is, a long time since I've used Apache Camel, but it was an integration technology. So we can, Jakarta, it'll depend on Jakarta and how far it goes that way, and MicroProfile and how far it goes that way, because we'll be standards based. So if it goes in to take on more of the functions of Camel, then we would go that way as well. But at the moment, we're basically just building the rest. If Jakarta goes that way, we'll do it.
Okay, bro. Martin Granny asks, does the Payara instance still need to be offline for the backup?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that. Good one for the forum, that one.
Yeah, I'll post the link to the forum and I'm sure we can get an answer there. Carlos Conclavis asks again, one other thing. Did I get right that Payara 6 will no longer be based on Glassfish 6, meaning it will no longer be viable a direct migration from Glassfish? Is it because of promoting HK2 to a full spec, brackets, or others, question mark?
Yeah, so Payara hasn't actually been based on the Glassfish source code since Glassfish 4. It's always been based on our source code. So that doesn't mean to say a direct migration from Glassfish 6 will not be possible, because that's sort of slightly different. A lot of the components are very similar, and some of the work we may do for the new CDI, we may do at Eclipse Foundation rather than within Payara. Well, we'll still do it within Payara, but we may do it at the Eclipse Foundation, and maybe we put it into Glassfish 6, because I'm basically the project lead for Glassfish 6. But when we have been in different code bases for a long time, it's actually quite complicated because we have forked from Oracle Glassfish, and therefore we're still on the old Oracle license agreements. When Oracle donated to Eclipse, they changed all the license agreement to the Eclipse public license. We can't actually donate our code back without some complexity.
Okay. Jan Nielsen asks, are there any plans regarding stop using Corba and move to HTTP/RMI? I think you did mention that actually.
Yeah, so we are looking at other remote EJB protocols. So we have an HTTP one now. It doesn't support everything that EJB can do, because EJB can do a lot of weird stuff. Most people don't use it, but it can do client-side transaction demarcation and things like that. So our HTTP remote doesn't enable that at the minute, but it can do straight session beans. We're also looking at replacing the Corba IOP, well, potentially replacing it with the gRPC. It may not be a replacement, it may just be re-enable gRPC as another protocol. But we are looking at remote EJBs. I know it's totally unfashionable to like remote EJBs, but there are lots of things people like remote service calls, hence gRPC, which is just, you know, a new sexier Corba, or maybe not even sexier. But we will be supporting other protocols to talk to EJBs rather than Corba. Corba is bad for firewalls, so that's why we create the HTTP remoting.
Real. And then one last one from Castillo Ramirez. He asks, is Payara 100% free? And can I use my favorite OpenJDK distribution to run Payara?
So yes, Payara is open source. It is free as in open source. So there are licenses that you have to comply with, but they are standard open source licenses. And yes, we support standard OpenJDKs. In fact, there's a whole list of things that we support online. We support OpenJ9 as well, and we support OpenJDK, and we support Oracle JDK, and we support Amazon Corretto, which is another OpenJDK variant.
Sure. I'll post a link to the datasheet so people can see the full list. But yeah, there's quite a few on there. The only significant one is that if you're a Payara Enterprise customer, we do have Azul partnership.
Yeah, so for Payara Enterprise, you get fully supported enterprise builds of Zulu. Was it? Azul.
Yeah, Azul.
Zulu. I can't say Azul Zulu very fast. And they are, for that is an OpenJDK derived distribution of Java. So that's the one that we recommend, but they don't have to run on that as an enterprise customer.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. If you follow those links, you can get a download, and you can get started guides. We're all over the place online as well. You can see us on Twitter. We have a meetup group as well, where we'll be posting all these events. And as well, if you are part of a JUG and you want to be involved with Payara, or you want to collaborate in some way, we're really open to that. Just get in touch through that link at the bottom, /reef, and we'll happily work with you. So thank you all. Real.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.